You're listening to All Things Video, the podcast dedicated to uncovering the past and charting the future of the online video ecosystem. You're listening to All Things Video. I'm your host, James Creech, and today's guest is Andrew Kamphey, creator of Influence Weekly. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, James. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited we get to do this. One, because you've been a longtime friend and trusted resource of mine. You have single-handedly probably referred me to more smart, incredible people just to connect with or have on this podcast. So this is long overdue, and I'm excited to hear a little bit more about your journey.
Oh, wow. The reason I refer so many people is because I'm so scared that like my story isn't really exciting and really isn't really awesome. Like I'm like, oh, these other people are way more interesting than I am.
I think
so this
you might prove you wrong today. We'll see.
This is a very scary situation.
Nice. Well, I want to start off just by kind of traveling back in time and let's hear how you got your first beginnings in media and entertainment.
I mean, how far do you want to go back? Because like 2.5 years ago, I started the newsletter Influence Weekly. Mm-hmm. I started that literally because I was working in influencer marketing and wanted to find data-informed, data-driven information about the influencer marketing industry, which 2.5 years ago was very hard to find.
Sure.
Oddly, still is hard to find.
Yeah.
2.5 years has not changed it, and I haven't really plugged the holes or I don't know, the opposite of plug those. I haven't made the leaks. I haven't created the leaks.
I feel the same way. That was one of the big reasons I started this podcast, is so much of the oral history about this space is just not captured anywhere, right? I wanted to tell the stories of the entrepreneurs and innovators in digital media, technology, gaming, music, influencer marketing, right? Like kind of covering all these areas that are kind of just like the inside baseball, the things that people don't know about these different industries.
That's so funny that you say inside baseball, because the company I used to work at, the Q, one of the executive producer, he had that term inside baseball, and he always used it in a derogatory way, like, oh, this is what you're writing here is inside baseball, no one's gonna get it. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like now I'm like fully inside baseball. Like I'm like, no, that's where I want to live. Like,
right.
I'm not a broadcaster.
You just found the definition of a niche audience, and there's value there, right? It's like some people love the inside baseball. I love talking shop with people who've been in the space for 10, 15 years. And you're like, this person used to work with that person, and then they had this company that didn't get off the ground, and this company like changed its name and pivoted its strategy because of these things. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and like I find so much information, and this is mirrored in Influence Weekly, is like I find so much information in anecdotes more than like aggregated data. So week to week in Influence Weekly, it is very up and down. Like sometimes it's just a bunch of interviews, sometimes it's these like epic reports, surveys, and I like read them. I read like 100 articles a week, and I give you like the top 10, but not even the top 10, actually, the best 10 and the most insightful 10, which the term most insightful is very specific for me, where I actively don't share with you the articles that are shared across like LinkedIn and Twitter. Like you already got those, you read that headline. I actively work against that. So that the niche, you brought up the niche audience. It's like my audience is super niche. They're like, oh yeah, like this independent resource. It's literally this guy that's figuring out what's interesting and what's not, and then procuring it for me. So I did that 2.5 years ago because I was working in the industry, and this is gonna sound bad, but like I wanted to know, what we're doing day to day correct? I had these very existential questions of like, is this the right business practice? Is this the right tactic? Is this the right strategy? We were making ads, influencer marketing ads on Musical.ly, actually, before TikTok existed. Or not before TikTok, but along with TikTok.
Sure.
And I was just, and on YouTube as well, and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. But I was just like, what benchmarks are there, and what is this world that I'm suddenly in after I had been like in LA working with and for creators. I like produced Vine shows back like years ago.
How did you get into that?
Oh, my best friend in the world like knew I was in LA, and I had moved to LA after working on cruise ships, and I was like, I just want to work in film and TV. And he's like, well, I have this project that I want to do on Vine where we're gonna make these like not fake shows, they're real shows, but they're all the idea. By the way, this idea is batshit crazy, but also like you're gonna say, oh my god, this sounds wonderful, and I'm like, yeah, the idea was wonderful, the execution was not.
Okay.
The idea was there would be separate shows on Vine. You would sign up to a channel, you would watch this show, but every single show was fit underneath the umbrella of a company that was making all of these shows. And the company was from the future. And in like 50 years in the future, the creators became the biggest celebrities in the world. This is by the way, we were correct.
I was going to say, this sounds like you're predicting the future a little bit.
We did. We actually accurately predicted the future, but we made it in the disguise of this mega company, like a Walmart or or Amazon, or even like the weird company in Pixar's Wall-E, where like that kind of company goes back to the past, creates these fake creators to then like become the best creators in the world later. Like, but you could tell they're like corporations make them.
This is sounding a lot like me. I've been nerding out recently over season 2 of The Boys on Amazon.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It sounds a lot like VOT. I don't know if you've watched the show, but the whole idea of like the superheroes manufactured by a corporation to be these superstars and the seedy underbelly. Anyway, that's a little bit about what I'm watching recently. But I want to kind of untangle some of these threads because you've given us a bit of a reverse chronology of your background. But things kind of started earlier than that, right? You went to college. One of the things that stood out to me from your bio is that you launched the Florida Film Fiasco, which is this 24-hour short form like film contest, a film festival, right? Where every team has a day, probably like from midnight to midnight, to create a film, and then you have to present it. So what inspired you to launch this film festival? What got you into that creative process?
Have you and I ever talked about this before?
Never, ever. So I'm so excited to hear the background.
Okay. I can tell you the entire story of how that came about, but like, I want to point out something that like literally made my entire career, because in Gainesville, Florida at our college, I put this event together. It wasn't just me, it was a partner of mine, Priscilla, who was amazing, and I can tell you the story of her. But like, we put this event together completely just a total like, we just wanted it to exist. And for 2 weeks, like, we had these applications for teams, and like I was part of I wasn't part of the film crew, but I was like part of film like clubs and stuff. I knew them. We had 0 submissions for teams until literally the day of submissions. There was this
like film school. I went to USC for film production, and the exact same thing happened, right? Every time you have a film festival, it's like nobody signs up, and then it's the last day, and they're all procrastinators. It's right at the deadline.
But it ended up being like, literally we had this black basket, like a milk crate, that were like, put your application in here at this store that I had, like, this is a very hippie kind of like Gainesvillian thing. Everyone will know it. Like, there is not a free store, but a co-op store of like records and albums that I used to like volunteer at. And I was like, just in the front of this, and you know, everyone has to find this place, but everyone knew it. It was on the main strip. But again, I was like, God damn, mate, did I make this too hard for people? And then literally the entire basket was filled that day. And then I was there to pick it up, and people were like, somebody like walked in and was like, am I too late? I was like, oh, okay. Oh my God.
People care. No. They want to be part of this. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then we held the event, and what it was, you got, okay, we also, if you ever did a 24-hour film like festival thing where you make the film in 24 hours, or it got really popular, the 48-hour film one. we did something no one else would do. We did something literally I've never seen anywhere else, and I do not wish this upon anyone else. No one else could have done this. What we did is, I was in the theater program and knew all, like, a bunch of actors, and it was like one of the things when you're in college and an actor, you're just like, do as many things as possible. And so I knew, like, all these actors just, like, didn't have anything to, like, they just would work on anything. And I was like, okay, so why it's called the Fiasco, it was very specific, not specific. We didn't realize how much of a fiasco it would be. But what we did is, at 8 p.m. on Friday night, every team, and we assigned 2 random actors. We actually got 2 people to apply to be like, I'll be in a 24-hour film, and 2 of them were assigned to one team.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a room, we had, I think it was like 20 teams the first year. And so okay, there was definitely 5 teams.
Okay.
Because it was 50 actors.
Yep.
And 25 teams all in one room that could fit about 75 people.
So you paired the filmmakers up with talent, right? Actors who can be in the program. That's awesome.
But at 8 p.m., everyone, like, opened their envelope and had to, like, figure out. We didn't realize this until it happened. I was like, oh, this is actually a fiasco, because people are like, who are you? What's your name? I need to find you. I need to go to my team. I need to get you. And we ran out the week before, like the day before the event. We only had 49 people sign up as actors. And so Priscilla, my partner on this, we were, like, sitting there thinking, like, where are we going to get just one more person? Like, she had already signed up. We had decided, like, I couldn't do it because I was filming documentaries, and I was like, I'm going to go visit every single team during the 24 hours and make a documentary. And we're like, where are we going to get another person? And she literally goes, wait, give me 5 minutes. And she runs out of her not her apartment where she lived. And she's like 5 minutes later, she comes back and she's like, I got a goat.
A goat?
A goat. I was like, what?
So she's like, my neighbor. That's awesome. So her neighbor's goat was the 50th talent
actor,
film festival. That's amazing.
And so I mean, this really turned into a real fiasco, because, like, one team opens it and, like, they're like, I need to find a person named Goat. And I'm like, no, there's the goat. And, like, point. And they're like, we get a goat for 24 hours? I was like, yes. They're amazing. Like, we have to put a goat in a film? Like, wait, what?
That's so good.
Like, yeah, like, during the 24 hours when I finally met that team and I was, like, filming them, they're like, yeah, we have all of these positions. Like, we knew beforehand, we knew who was the writer, who was the director. We knew who, like, the actors were until, like, the other ones. But we didn't realize we needed a goat poop picker-upper. And, like, one of the teammates literally had to, like, keep scooping up goat poop.
That's got to go down in the film festival history books. As
right.
Very...
Well, and then the entire event ends up becoming a really interesting, untalked about part of the world now, because from that event, I ended up meeting a bunch of people, and from that event, a bunch of people ended up becoming YouTubers.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which, like, then now you think about, like, oh, how do you, like, this was 20 years ago. Like, making a film or a short film in 24 hours was unheard of, was like a fun little practice. But now it is literally YouTube. It's like,
yeah, that's what people do for a career, day in and day out. Wow.
Every single day. And so, of course, the people that were predisposed to, like, oh, I'll do this thing in 24 hours. Yeah, I have a camera. Yeah, I have a laptop to edit. Or not a laptop then. We had, like, IMAX.
Wow. Yeah, no, totally. Makes sense. So how did you go from running this 24-hour film festival at your college to working on cruise ships?
You really did go down my entire
Yeah, man. CV. I want to hear it. Let's do it.
So after college, so I ran the film festival for 3 years. I met every one of my best friends, and still to this day, my best friend is an entertainment lawyer who was there. Like, he and I ended up making, like, short films together. And then after college, I literally had no idea what to do, except I knew I had gotten a theater degree, and I knew I wanted to have a camera on my shoulder as a profession. I was like, I want to be paid to film, I had done a bunch of documentaries, like, bad like my own little short films, not realizing that one of the other people in my college, literally while we were there, became one of the top YouTubers ever.
Wow. Who's that?
I don't want to say his name.
Okay, no worries.
He's been blacklisted.
Ah.
So if somebody has a blacklist and goes down all of the names and figures out who's from Florida, you'll figure it out.
Okay, fair enough.
You can do the math yourself. But everyone who worked with him that ended up going to LA, working in YouTube, working at Maker Studios, and everyone who worked around him is a wonderful person. They are like wonderful people to know and cherish and spend time with and make great creative productions. He is a terrible person.
Fair enough. All right.
And so I had that like on the back of my head, is like, okay, as long as I get a job somewhere doing film in some capacity, I can always go to LA and work there. So I applied to just a bunch of jobs around the world. Like I ended up applying to a cruise ship job, but then like 2 weeks later, I just left Florida. I was like, I need to get out of Florida. And I drove to Chicago. I had some friends there I'd stayed with. On the way to Chicago, I did the phone call for Royal Caribbean for a job on a ship. And basically at the end of the call, I like was like, oh yeah, I don't think I have enough experience. Like I don't have enough professional experience to do this film thing on ships. And they're like, oh, but you have a degree in theater. We'll get you on in the theater. I was like, okay, maybe. But it sounds like I didn't get the job. Like I told them.
Yeah.
And I went to Chicago, and I ended up in Chicago on my friend's couch for a month, got a part-time job as a Santa. Yeah, it was that time.
Wait, what? Okay.
I don't know if anyone's ever read David Sedaris's My Santaland Diaries.
No.
But the first paragraph or first page is literally my life. Like I literally opened like a classified ad, saw that they were hiring Santas, circled it, mentioned to my friend, oh, wouldn't this be funny if I become a Santa?
Uh-huh.
I called the number. I went to the job interview. They're like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't think I can be Santa, but I'll be a Santa photographer.
Uh-huh.
And got the job. And then they're like, well, you should also be a Santa. And I was like, but like with me at that meeting, like literally sitting next to me at that meeting was a very old man with a real white beard who was in a electric scooter wheelchair.
Uh-huh.
And on the front of his wheelchair was literally the head of a stuffed animal head of Rudolph. And I was like, I'm not Santa. That guy is Santa.
Yeah, that's the real Santa.
Yeah, I mean, that is like legitimate, like Miracle on 34th Street, real Santa there.
Wow.
He just came from the North Pole. He's riding Rudolph, for God's sakes.
There you go.
And so, but they hired me because they're like, oh yeah, you can speak well. Like they asked like other people there, like, oh, what did you do before this? And they're like, I babysat my cousin. I was like, oh, I think I'm like in the top 10% of hires here.
So you become a Santa in Chicago, and then when did you get the call from Royal Caribbean that it's time to pack your bags?
4 months later, it was legitimately like December 15th, and they're like, hey, we have a job for you. It's next week. Just you have to get here first, but you'll get a job. You have a job waiting for you. And I was like, could you just wait 10 days? I have this job right now that ends on December 25th.
I can't tell you why.
I have to do some deliveries. No, but I don't know why. Like I was just so like focused on like I have a pay. Like I was getting a check every week. I was like so happy. I was living in a really shitty apartment in Chicago, but it didn't matter. I was like, Chicago is amazing, and still to this day, those 4 months, like my God, Chicago's an amazing. I got out exactly at the right time. I got out January in Chicago, which is like from January to March is just hell.
Yeah, you don't want to be there in the winter.
I got to see my first snow. I got
Yeah.
to be Santa. I was also paid. I was paid minimum wage, so I actually wrote a screenplay called Minimum Wage Santa, predating Bad Santa, by the way.
Ah, wow. Okay.
I was not pissed that they made Bad Santa. I love Bad Santa, but I was
Sure.
like, oh, I have this story, Minimum
Yep.
Wage Santa. Oh, and I even published an ebook about it.
Hmm.
I blogged about it at the time.
Cool. So you get the call, and Royal Caribbean says you need to come back to Florida, or where were you? Where was the port we were shipping out?
Well, I didn't do it. I was
wow.
like, I have a job until December 25th. I'm going to keep that job.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, well, and I was like, can you just wait 10 days? And they're like, no, you have to agree to this and do it. Like, it's your spot.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. I was like, okay, I guess I lost this job then. Like, hung up the phone, did
and
my
no plan
job.
what you were going to do 10 days after Christmas. It's all over. Okay.
I was just going to get another minimum wage job. I was like, I have an apartment. I have these girls' numbers. Like, I'm like living the life. And so after, I think it was like January 5th or something, I still hadn't had another job. It was, it's the Christmas holidays. Like, nobody's getting a job then. And Royal Caribbean calls me again, and they're like, oh, that we have a job for you. And I was like, okay, when is it? They're like, next Thursday. I was like, oh, really? Like, I have to be in Florida. Like, I had to be in Miami next Thursday. And I was like, fuck, I have an apartment. I have to get rid of I have a car. Like, so yeah, I literally like got rid of my apartment as quickly as possible.
Wow.
Got in my car, drove back to Florida, stopped off at my parents' not apartment, house. My dad drove me the rest of the way down to Miami. I get on the ship, and like I thought it was all a scam. I was like, this can't be real. Like, you can't just like get a call. I'm sitting in Chicago in January, and I'm like now in Florida on a cruise port. I get on the ship. I start working. Like, the first day was the longest day of my life of work. And then the next day we ported in Puerto Rico, and it was like the very first port I've ever been on. I've never been on a cruise ship before that. And I'm like walking off the pier, and the very first thing I see is a Chicago burger. It was a restaurant called Chicago Burger. I was like, I was just there.
Yeah, that's an odd, coincidence.
Such a weird thing. Yeah, and then I ended up working on cruise ships for like 5 years. I took a break, every 6 months or something, you take a break. Ended up living in Mongolia for 4 months.
Wow. Okay. So what were you doing in Mongolia?
That's actually where I got film and TV experience. So what happened is I was working in theater on ships, and they wouldn't promote me because they're like, oh, you don't have the same thing on the call. It's like, you don't have film and TV experience. You've made videos, but you don't have professional experience. I'm like, yeah, that's what I came to you for. And so my buddy had been in Mongolia for 2.5 years in Peace Corps. He got a job in a TV network and literally, like, not just remembered me, but like actively petitioned for me. They're like, it's a startup TV network in Mongolia called BTV.
Okay.
And he convinced them that I was a film director, a TV director, and could direct a TV show. And I was like, yeah, I could think about that.
This is the wildest story. So we're back, and I'm excited to hear about your time in Mongolia and really digging in and getting some film and TV experience. So how on earth did you end up there?
So my friend had been working 2.5 years in the Peace Corps, decided to stay in Mongolia. I will jump ahead a little bit because I didn't know what I'm about to tell you. I didn't know. He originally got a job as an English teacher for the English news hosts of a new English language news program. And then within 2 weeks, he convinced them to give him the host position of an English language news program in Mongolia, which would be Mongolia's first English news program.
Okay.
And the person that he chose, and because all of the staff like didn't know English very well, like Mongolia at that time, this was oh my God, this is 10 years, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Um, Mongolia still wasn't like very like there were Peace Corps people teaching English. That they didn't have like great English schools. It's still a mining colony basically for Russia. Russia destroyed the culture there, kind of stuff. Um, and also, Kublai Khan didn't do much help when he moved the capital of the Mongolian nation to what now is Beijing. Like he didn't really help anything. And
Sure.
there's a weird I don't know, I didn't really mean to give you a history lesson, but there's this weird love of Genghis Khan, not Genghis Khan, the KH is Han, but a hate of Kublai Khan because he moved the capital away from Mongolia. So like Genghis Khan made a weird history story.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
So they convince. So basically, like he's like, hey, let me do a. This is literally how it happened. He's like, hey, let me do a Skype call with you, talk about what they need. And I was like, all right. I'm on the Skype call with him, and in the background, like the director of the television network, she passes by, and my friend's like, oh, here's Andrew. Do you want to talk to him? And she pops in. She's like, hi, Andrew. I hear you're coming to Mongolia. And I was like, okay. Yes.
This was news to you.
Yeah. And like that was the first call I had with my friend about like what do they need, what do they want me to do. They're like, yeah, I'm making the show, I need a director. But like it wasn't actually, the point wasn't me to direct his show, it was just like to get me there, and they would pay for the flight. So I was like, well, as long as they're gonna pay for the flight. Oh, and then they also were paying for an apartment for him anyways, like for 3 months. So they're like, so basically they'll pay for my flight. I got an apartment there with him. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. They don't need to pay extra. They're just paying for his apartment, but it's like 2-bedroom.
Sure.
And we're gonna get a salary. And I was like, sounds great. Sign me up.
So your international adventures continue. Very good.
Well, the red flags started happening, and like they paid for half the flight there. I had to pay like $700 for the flight there. They paid for the apartment. Within 2 weeks, we got fired.
Wow. Why did you get fired?
Because we submitted our like not salary, but the hours we spent, and then said, okay, you owe us this amount of money for this amount of work. And the accountant got it. Like we went into the accountant's office, gave him this thing, and he looks at it. He looks at us, looks at it, gets up out of his chair and walks into the director's office. And we're like, this can't be good. And the director says, we'll pay this, but that's it. And we're like, wait, what do you mean that's it? We like came here for a job. Like, what?
Yeah.
We had already started producing his show. Literally, it was like a 15-minute show that took like half the day to write, and then, a half a day to edit. And then it was a 15-minute show that went on. And I made a bet with him very early on. I was like, he knew Mongolia way better than I did. So obviously I took a bad bet, but we bet like $1 that like within the time that we're there, a cab driver is going to recognize him. I was like, there's no way. This is a large country. There's 3 million people here, 2 million people in the city. Like, who watches this thing? Like, no one's gonna recognize you. And literally like 10 days later, a taxi driver was like, oh, you're the host of the news show. What? Like, I was in the taxi. I was like, what are you talking about? I lost that damn bet.
Well, there you go. So that ended up being a bit of a bust. So you go back to cruises, or is that when you moved to LA? Where do we go?
No, I ended up spending 4 months in Mongolia. I spent 2 weeks with a job. They ended up never paying us. We went into litigation with them. We got the police involved because we're like, you owe us. And also we just wanted a job. Like, and we didn't get fired. We didn't get fired because it was a bad job. Like, the show was running. Like, the show was on daily and it was like running. It was fine. And at first I was like, I don't think we're too expensive, because we would negotiate. It was a really weird situation, but literally like within 3 days, my friend got a job as a editor-in-chief of a nightlife magazine in Mongolia. I started teaching English because I went to this is Mongolia at that time. I went to a party that my friend was hosting, and I sat next to a girl who was like, we were just chatting, and she's like, "You speak English?" I was like, "Yeah, I do." She's like, "My mother runs a private school and needs an English teacher. Can you do it?" I was like, "Sure." I
There you
never,
go.
I never,
Networking.
I never taught English in my life, and I never will again.
Huh.
It was awful experience. But like I made music videos for local bands because I was like, well, I'm here to film stuff. I know this is now gonna be on like this is recorded. This has never been recorded ever before. What I'm about to say, and I feel really bad. But basically, I I excelled at the like job of directing a TV show. Like everything there, I knew how to run, and like it was the very first time I'd ever done it. But I also did it for 2 weeks. And so when I went back onto the ship, so I ended up like 4 months later, I was like, I got to get out of Mongolia. This is not working out very well. I don't want to teach English. I don't want to do any of this stuff. I want to go back on ships and work and find my way into film and television. And on the ship, I went back for 6 months. Basically, I had this like renewed focus of like, I never want to go back to Mongolia. That was like a like I got sent to the gulag. Like I got sent to Siberia. I was close to Siberia. Like I met Siberians. Like I literally tried to like get the phone number of the Siberian girl. I was like I was like just south of Siberia.
So that was your
So
new North Star, was get as far away from Mongolia
yeah.
as you can, return to the life at sea.
So I was like, yeah, now I'm like eating great meals. I'm on a cruise ship like literally 6 days after I wanted to go back on ships. They're like, okay, we got a spot for you. Get to Mexico. And I was like, all right, I'll get there. There's nothing stopping me now. And yeah, and then for 6 months I did my day job, and then literally every single night that I had a chance, I went and trained to be a broadcast technician. 7 days a week. I made enemies as well because the broadcast, like the manager there, never promoted zero. He never promoted anyone in his entire career. And I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I did not prove him wrong. It was his replacement. It was the person who came in after he spent 4 months on the ship. I trained every single day. And then literally he left. And the guy who replaced him was this super nice Canadian guy, just an amazing, wonderful person who, in their handover from like positions, he wrote this note about me and like was like, oh, there's this guy who's training to be a broadcast technician. And so literally within like days of that guy leaving, the other guy's like, hey, come in and do this show. We need you. And I was like, well, you need me? And it was just his way to like get me into the room and like see if I could do it. And I did it. I switched like a show, and within 2 months I got a call from the main office. Is like, hey, we want to do an interview with you to get you to this next job. Do you have any professional experience, like beyond just training on the ship? And I was like, yes.
Yes, I do.
I
I ran a
directed a show.
television show in Mongolia.
Yeah. Oh, which is not a lie in any way.
Yeah, I love it.
I told the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And that's all they got from me. And then, yeah, for like 3 years, I worked as a broadcast tech and was literally like the very first, because it took so much time and effort and like work to get there. And I wasn't proving that I could do it. I proved that I did do it. Like it was a
Sure.
different circumstance.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, like they loved the work I did. I ended up shooting a documentary on board with a friend of mine, Valerie Perry. Me and her, I produced it, she directed it, a documentary on them installing Saturday Night Fever on the ship. Never in the history of Royal Caribbean had crew members produced a documentary like this. Like crew members usually just do the daily stuff that you need to do.
Sure.
We, in our free time, and our boss was like totally against it. He was like, don't do it, you're wasting your time. And I was from the theater, so I knew every single person in the theater, and they specifically gave us and me permission to be in places that no broadcast crew had ever been given permission to film. We got to do interviews with every single installing person from the shore side who were super excited that they were being interviewed about the work they were doing right then and there. And Saturday Night Fever was a big deal. It's a big Broadway show being put on a ship.
Sure.
And then they started talking about it in the office, and we got scared. We're like, oh, they're gonna tell our bosses in the office, and we're gonna get shut down. But they didn't. They were just like, oh, we just like doing this. This is fun. So what happens? We sent we produced this documentary and sent it to the office, thinking like, well, let's show them what we can do, and maybe like the next time they'll be able to like use it. And they're like, we love this. It's going on every single ship right now. Like they just sent it to every ship, and it ran on the entire fleet of this documentary. I was like, oh wow.
Amazing.
It's still online actually. I was just watching it on YouTube like a month ago.
Okay. So you produced this documentary behind the scenes of Saturday Night Fever, and then when did LA start calling your name?
There were some problems on the ship, and like the position that I was in lost a lot of privileges, and I was like, all right, it's my time to leave. I spent 5 years on cruise ships, accomplished everything I wanted to do, I think, on ships. And literally, like, our contracts were 6 months at a time, and then we had 2 months off, and we always left the ship without a contract. Like, not everybody like, you had an implicit idea, like, just check your email, you'll get a contract within the next week or two. So every single 6 months you leave, you are fired, essentially. You're now no longer a Royal Caribbean employee. And so I just didn't sign up for another one. I was like, I literally got off the ship in Cape Canaveral. I spent one night in Orlando and then flew directly. Oh, I flew to San Diego and then drove up to LA. So I didn't fly directly to LA.
And what was in San Diego at the time?
Oh, my friend who had been. So now by this time, all of my friends who went out to LA became a big YouTube star, and all of my friends worked with him. And suddenly I get to San Diego and I start asking like real questions like, oh, where should I go find work? What should I do? And they're like, don't work with this guy. He's an asshole. I was like, oh, okay. Well, there goes that plan.
Oops. And this is
and
when you started producing Vine videos with some of your former college buddies?
Yeah, I was like, like surviving in LA is hard. Like you got to pay rent, right? And so we started producing Vine videos. I started getting, just random gigs. I ended up like, God, it was so depressing. A year into LA, thinking I'm on top of the world because I like did this amazing stuff on Royal Caribbean in this 50,000 person company. I did stuff that like historically had never been done before, and then come to LA where you're like, you're nothing. Just nothing.
Yeah.
Nobody goes on cruise ships in LA. We're too busy. So it's like really struggle. I ended up even as like a minimum wage job at Universal Studios. Like I was like, why am I here? Like, well, I got to pay rent. Like, met some fantastic people through there, and this is a common refrain about like 20 somethings will go work at Disney and they end up like on TV in a year or two. Like they end up just, that's LA, right? Everybody's a waitress, waiter, working it one way or another. And yeah. My friend ended up sending me a job, not even a job posting, just an email for a job. He's like, hey, you have to join this startup. It's called Fork U. Like, and he spelt it FORQ space YOU. And I was like, I emailed him back, within a half a day. I was like, I can't find anything on this Fork U. If it is what I think it is, which is like a foodie kind of like show.
Yeah.
Like I would love to do it. I had already like by that time. I was on the Food Network. When I was in LA, I applied to a cooking competition, and I'm on a Food Network show competing for a food truck.
Wow. Okay.
I'm the Gizzard Wizard.
Okay.
You can watch it on Amazon for like $2. So
there we go.
Food truck face off. And so like my friend sent this to me. That's why it makes sense. Fork U. And he's like, it doesn't exist yet. They're just starting up. My friend is hiring. Here's my friend's email. She'll interview you.
Yeah.
And I go in, and it's not. He messed up the typing. The company's name is QYOU.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with food. It was like MTV, if MTV existed now, all YouTube videos put together. And then like, this is a weird side story. Like 2 years after that, I ended up creating a YouTube channel called 4Q because I was like, this is such a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. So you ended up at the Q.
Yeah. So I ended up at the Q, and this is a weird story because I had worked on cruise ships as like a TV technician. I ran an entire network. Like, we did everything. We programmed, we switched shows, like live shows, parades. We did these epic parades where there was like a man on the ground with a camera, live camera, plus a bunch, like 7 robotic cameras. Like, I had run TV in this like tiny little station, made documentaries, made TV shows, made every week, edited, filmed everything. And I come to the Q, which is a TV network that didn't exist, and they're like filming these segments, and we're taking so long. Like, it takes so fucking long to make television now. I was like, this is so slow. I had so much time to waste, and so I started helping them like organize their operations in Google Sheets, and like, I got advice. Okay, I got this advice from a producer that I talked to in LA. He's like, whenever you get a job, this is the only thing you have to do. You have to be the first one in and the last one out. And I was like, oh, you mean like, just like work hard and be there a long time? He's like, no. You don't have to work hard. You don't have to do a good job. You just have to be the first one in and the last one out. I was like, why? And he explained to me, it's like in LA and in entertainment, there's always going to be some group of people that are the early people, and there's going to be some group of people that are the late people. You don't know where your next job is going to come from. It could be one of those two groups. So you have to be with both of those groups.
That's actually kind of a good point. Hang out with both the early birds and the night owls. Not great for your personal time or sleep schedule, but yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter because your job isn't to do the job. This is like just such a weird LA thing.
It's
your job
very
is
Hollywood
not to do
advice.
The job. It's to get to next job.
Exactly. It's the most Hollywood advice I've ever heard. I love it. Okay.
Yeah. So I did it. Like, I didn't know better. Like, everyone else, whoever would get that advice would be like, I know better. I'll just do this other thing. And then they'll struggle. But also, I was just so bored. I was like, I'm here. I'm the first one in, and I'm literally the last one out. I left after the CEO and the president left. It's a small startup. It's like 20 people in a room. I ended up knowing everyone. The executive producer was the first one in, but I was always there before him. And the CEO and the president saw me at night. So whenever they talked about me, they were like, someone would say, oh, he's here before me. And someone would say, oh, he's here after me. And I was like, within 2 months, I got a promotion and became like operations there. Also, like, that was a weird time because I literally had nothing else to do but like make a career in TV and film. And I was like, oh, I'm working in TV. Like,
you were loving it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I've had Kurt Marvis on the show, one of the co-founders and the president. And he's just got fascinating stories from his time back in the days at MTV and then, at Lionsgate. He's full of amazing stories. So I'm sure it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, like literally it was literally me and him for like 2 months at the end of the night, and he would have like not whiskey, but like a drink and just start talking. And I was like, what else? I'm just here waiting for him to leave. I'm like, I'll listen. And he ended up being one of the most wonderful, like, story. Like, he's
terrific.
Amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was such a lucky chance and a lucky, like, but that's LA, right? That's Hollywood. Is like, Robert Evans was found at a poolside because he looked like some woman's dead husband. Like, this is Hollywood.
That's how it works sometimes. Odd. Okay. So you're in LA, you're working for the Q for 4 years. And at a certain point, adventure calls again, and you say, I'm going to pack my bags and I'm going to move halfway across the world. How did that happen?
Well, okay, this is a weird story too. Is like, because I had worked on cruise ships, I had friends all over the world. Like a third of all cruise ship workers are Filipino, and I had a wife during this time. I got married. She was Japanese. Well, she's still Japanese. She's just no longer my wife.
And how did you two meet? What was the,
Well,
what
we were
happened?
on the cruise ship together,
Okay.
so we
Yep.
met there. And while I was working at the Q, I like literally went to Japan for 2 weeks to get married. A year later, the Q is not doing so well. We lay off like 25% of the staff. My friends leave. 2 weeks before that, that was like January 25th or something. Oh yeah, no, I knew that. I know exactly. That was January 25th. January 15th, I signed divorce papers. So I was like, oh, my life, literally everything I've ever done for the last 5 years of my life is now just doing badly.
Time for a change. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was January, and I got an email. Oh, and I also built up like a Twitter account of 100,000 followers around travel. It was partly because I had nothing else to do in LA and I had gotten advice like, oh, build up your social media profiles. Because I was on cruise ships. I didn't know about social media at that point. They're like, build up your social media profiles, show that you create good work, and then you'll get a deal or a job or do something. In that time period, I ended up getting 100,000 followers on Twitter around travel. I got an email asking me if I wanted to take a press trip to the Philippines. This was like March, I think. I had to go in and tell my boss, I was like, I need 3 days off. And he's like, for what? I'm like, to go to the Philippines. What?
That's a quick turnaround. Yep.
It is. It was a 5-day trip and 2 days over the weekend.
Part of it falls over the weekend. Yep. Okay.
But it's a press trip. I don't know if you know, like press trips or influencer trips now. They are super fast. You get pushed through everything, and it was a whirlwind. But I was like, it was my first time in the Philippines, and I was just like absolutely loved it. And I did the math. I got back to LA. I did the math, and I found an Airbnb 1-bedroom apartment and a round trip ticket to the Philippines plus a 1-bedroom apartment with Wi-Fi cost $200 more than my rent in LA.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, for 1 month, if I just Airbnb my place out, like find someone to rent my place, then all I have to do is I'm spending that money anyway. So now I spend $200 and I get a round trip ticket to the Philippines.
Amazing.
So I went to my boss and I was like, I'm leaving. And he's like, oh, you're leaving the Q. Where are you going to go work? I'm like, no, I'm leaving the country.
Okay.
But my boss, Glenn, Glenn's been on the show too, no?
No, but I know Glenn very well. Yeah.
Yeah. Glenn is a wonderful He's probably going to watch this or listen to this. He's a wonderful salesman. Of anything he's ever done in his life. He's a very, very good salesman. And I gave him a chance. I quit. I didn't give him a 2 weeks notice. I gave him a 30 days notice. And in that 30 days, he convinced me to continue working, but from where I was going.
Okay.
Which is weird. Usually, if you want to work remotely, you have to convince your boss to work remotely.
Sure, not the other way around.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was like, I really need, I cannot be in LA anymore. This is just wacko. So what happened was, to make another long story short, they agreed for me to work remotely. I liked it so much, I stayed another month. When I got back to LA, everything was different with LA. My perspective, not LA was different, my perspective on LA and the world. And I had come to LA with such not a lot of experience, but just a lot of perspective, which is different than experience. And being in LA, I got a lot of experience without much perspective. Finally put the two together and realized that LA is not the city for me at this particular time in my life. This is not the kind of work I want to be doing. And so I worked freelance for the Q for a few months, a year. Ended up in Bali like a few months later, Chiang Mai, Thailand, and started traveling and working like a month at a time. I didn't do like, it wasn't traveling trips. It wasn't like 3 days here, 4 days there. Like I got an apartment in a place and moved there for a month and then moved to the next place for a month.
And how did you like that? My fiance and I did a house swap. So we lived in Amsterdam for 3 weeks last year. Loved it, right? It was so fun to feel like a local and get to actually
Mm-hmm.
experience a different culture. And, you know, we did the touristy things. I'd been to Amsterdam a few times. It was her first time. So, you know, we checked a few of those boxes. But more than anything, it was about like riding your bike to the grocery store and meeting local people and establishing new friendships and just like experience the culture at a slow pace rather than the frenetic pace that a tourist usually tries to take everything in.
Right. So I loved it. I love it. I can't think of doing anything else anymore. Um, you get to see more of the world in a more different way. But also like whatever way you want. Like I don't besmirch and I don't look down upon people who want to move every 3 days. Like if you go to certain places throughout like Africa, like you do not want to stay in a place for more than a week. Like it's, you want to go sort of down a trail and take a bus down. You know, there's certain perspectives I've seen. Like, God, one of the most interesting things, and I don't know if I could ever do it, is like, you know, Fun for Louie, the
No.
YouTuber. He's a YouTuber. He bought a Cessna plane, and then him and a buddy who was a pilot flew around the world.
Wow.
In Cessna. And what they did, you know, it's like they just hopped around the world. So like they constantly were traveling, constantly going, never in one place for more than like a night or two. And I can't ever imagine.
Yeah.
Even when I was on a cruise
style of taking it slow and really absorbing a place. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even on a cruise ship, like maybe it's my cruise ship style just worked for me, is like I was on a ship for 6 months, but I had lunch in like a different country every day.
Yeah, basically. So how did you settle on Bali? Why is that now your current home, current HQ?
It has the like the trifecta of good culture, good easygoing culture, good enough Wi-Fi, and enough area. Like it's big enough that it doesn't feel like I'm sitting on a beach all day. Like 4 weeks ago, I went up and spent 2 days on a coffee farm. Like coffee is only grown at altitude on like a mountainside in the tropics. Very hard to find, like, even though we have lots of coffee in the world, it's very hard to find that like Goldilocks zone. But Bali has it, even though Bali, you think of like all the beaches and stuff. Sure. It gets cold there. It's like a cold, like if you're like sick of sweating all day, just go up to Kintamani and like you can look at a mountain. Like
that's amazing. So yeah, people think of Bali as kind of this premier Indonesian beach resort town, but you found all these other dimensions to it, it seems like.
Yeah, like you can get lost in like if you're a diver, you can go off on a boat for 2 months, like a liveaboard. I have someone I met recently. This is actually a weird, like 28 days later kind of thing. I met a Spanish guy who got off of a liveaboard for 2 months and was like, there's a pandemic.
Uh-oh, wow.
This was like in April or something. He's like, what's going on in the world?
Sure. Understandably
like,
so. If you,
I was like, I have so much to tell you.
So how has that impacted life there, right? How has COVID impacted your businesses, your lifestyle, Indonesia in general? What does it look like?
So, okay, the main facts of it and the visceral effect of Bali itself, and I can talk about Indonesia as well. Indonesia is as bad as the US, I think, in its handling. But Bali, 80% of the GDP of Bali is tourism. And that doesn't exist. So you think like, okay, it's devastated. Like there are literally, I drive through cities here and they don't exist anymore. 100% closed down. what 80% GDP means is not that like that's an aggregate over the whole island. There's 4 million people that live here. That doesn't mean that, oh, their hotel is at 20% capacity. It means that the hotel is at 0% capacity. Across the whole entire island, actually, I think it's 4% occupancy right now for hotels.
Jeez.
There was a list about 5 months ago that was put out. Okay, a year ago, I created a list of 1,000 hotels, and I created an influencer's guide to Bali, which is not a travel guide to Bali, but for creators, people who want to come here and create content for their own audience. Here's the places to go. Here's what to do. Here's who to meet. I reached out to 1,000 hotels. 100 said, yes, we work with influencers. In 5 months ago, there was a different list of here's all of the hotels that have closed. And there were more hotels that it was easier to find a small list of those that are still open. Like
wow.
More hotels closed, just 100%.
Oh, geez, it's horrible.
So, yeah, here like that, you think like, okay, people now are starving or are out on their ass, you know, and it's a horrible situation, and it is. But the weird thing is in Bali, what that really means, that 80% of the GDP came from tourism, was like, that just shows you how different the amount of cash is that from outsiders. You drive around now, people are alive, people are surviving, because Bali has, again, like all of the facets that you need to like survive and live. It has pig farms, chicken farms, it has coffee farms, it has vegetables, it has fruit, it has its own industry here. It's self-sustaining industry that obviously if you have tourists coming in and you need to pump that up, but you have the money. But now that you have that vacuum of tourism, now you have real Bali. Now you have like, obviously people are still starving and people are having a hard time. They all go back to their homes, but it's like, it doesn't fall as far because they have a sense of stability, because you can, I mean, even in the best of times, you could get a meal for $1 or $2 US.
Sure.
And that didn't go away.
Yeah. When did you want to start focusing on the influencer marketing space? What was the original inspiration behind Influence Weekly? You know, how did you say, I'm going to take this project and really build it out?
Yeah. So when I was working at the Q, I got, so Glenn, my boss, wasn't originally my boss. He was working on an influencer project and needed help organizing it. And I was the operations guy and I did everything in Google Sheets. So he's like, literally, he's like, hey, I need a Google Sheet from you. So I started working with him, making a Google Sheet. And at that moment, I was an influencer. I was doing deals with my Twitter account. I had a YouTube channel that I did a deal with like Zipcar and stuff. Like, I thought I knew influencer marketing from the influencer side. And now as an agency, we were doing deals, these very large deals on YouTube. And something about the way that he did it felt wrong. Like, I was like, is this really, this information flow is not correct. It feels almost exploitative. And so I did that for about 1.5 years. And I was just like, I need to know more. Like, I need to understand this better. And so I started aggressively reading and seeking out information about what are the best practices, finding out that they're not written down. There's no oral history. There's no history at all. This thing doesn't exist. But here are some benchmarks. To spoiler alert, what we were doing is a common practice and wasn't exploitative. It was actually, funny enough, the way that Glenn does influencer marketing is oddly the best way to do it. Like, I found out over the last couple of years, like, oh, here's all these other ways to do influencer marketing that are inauthentic. They don't actually produce any results. And like 90% of deals like are terrible. And what Glenn was doing and we were doing actually was great. Like, we were actually setting forth, if Glenn wanted to share more, I think he could have really pushed the industry into a different way of thinking about things. And I still consider what he did and what we were doing there really effective and great campaigns, and really hard too. That's influencer marketing is very hard.
Yeah. So how would you summarize the lessons learned? What are the key takeaways for someone who's new to influencer marketing, maybe a brand that wants to dip its toe into the water? You know, what are the best practices?
Okay, so I told Glenn about this, that like, because I was like, oh, after 2 years, I finally I've realized like what you're doing is actually the correct thing. And he's like, oh, I hope you're not sharing, because I quit the queue like 2 years, yeah, almost 2 years ago. And he's like, I hope you're not sharing what we do. And I was like, Glenn, even if I told every single person on earth what you do and how you do it, they couldn't do it. Like, they would just not, it's not that it's hard, like, it's not that it's impossible or hard. It's like, it takes a dollop of creativity, a dollop of statistics, analysis, also domain knowledge, access to talent. Like, you need all of that together to make it work correctly. And I guess the best practice for me that I learned, and I wish I could just share with everyone else, like, do it this way and not any other way, is if you decide you're doing influencer marketing because other marketing avenues are either tapped out, you're at your max, the curve of your ROI is flattening, like you just cannot optimize any more Facebook ads, or like those kinds of ads, whatever content marketing, any other ad marketing you're doing is probably diminishing returns. So you're looking at influencer marketing to do that, and you're like, the typical way to do influencer marketing, at least from discovery platforms, Valid and included, like, is you look at, okay, I'm a travel brand, I want to find all the travel influencers, and you go like topic to topic. In reality, that performance of that is a local maximum, and you're going to tap out. You're going to hit a maximum when you find all of the travel influencers and you find the most optimized ones of those. That's a local maximum. It's a tiny little segment. Sure. What you really need to do, and what Glenn taught me, was go to your target, go to your audience, go to the people, the consumers you want to get to, that you want to buy your product, buy your service, use your thing, just without preconceived notions. Where do they consume content? Who do they look to? Without preconceived, like, don't think of yourself as a travel brand. Think of yourself, I'm just doing you have to do the market research, and you say, okay, what do they like? And then start forming patterns and find the formats. Find out what are the formats. Not, again, this is another weird thing. Everyone will be like, oh, look at the market research, find out who influences them and go to them. I'm like, no, you got one more step. What you do is you find the kind of content that they like, find the formats, and then you have to find the perfect trifecta match of your brand, someone who can create content in that format, your brand, and that person. And that personality is so important, and the way that they operate is so important. You really need to work with like professional people who understand their audience too. The brand knows their audience, the creator knows their audience, and then the creator and the brand come together in a creative campaign that neither could do alone. The brand really needs to add value beyond just the payment. And I haven't, and the thing with, even after 2.5 years of researching this and seeing through Influence Weekly, the biggest opportunity in influencer marketing is the campaign. Building something and creating a campaign, an advertising campaign that spans across multiple formats, multiple creators, and actually effectively promotes your product or service, is still lacking. And I think that's the number one problem with influencer marketing. But it's a fixable problem, right? You find benchmarks, baselines, you find statistics, you find good people that have creative ideas that can execute them, put teams together. Like, there's great solutions to this problem.
Yeah. What an interesting approach, right? Starting with, okay, let's understand the audience. What types of content do they consume? And then let's build our influencer programs around that incorporates the brand ethos.
Yeah. That's a lot of juggling parts. Like, you have to get the right talent, right thing. And should it be hard? I think your thesis is it shouldn't be that hard. Like, you should have technology help you, and I agree with that. I've covered a lot of technology, and I think the technology itself, at least some of the startups, not Paladin, but like the startups I've seen, have no conception of what influencer marketing really is. They think it's influencer discovery, or like, what is it called? I actually forgot the word, but like operations. Like, oh, you just need to do this thing
project
faster.
management, campaign reporting, right? These are the jobs, the tactical elements of what involves an influence campaign. But you're talking about, take a step back. Yes, there are these kind of components, but there's a broader strategic layer of thinking that informs how you approach influence marketing to begin with.
Yeah. And agencies also like are doing, it's easy to think to tag a brand as like a topic and then find all those influencers in that topic and then smush them together and see like what connections are there. And I don't mean it like badly, like that still produces good work. It doesn't produce great work.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any great campaign. And also, unfortunately, in what campaigns are so few and far between shared, for a variety of reasons. One reason being the brand doesn't want the agency talking about it. Two, the agency doesn't know if the brand wants to do it. The agency doesn't want to reveal their secrets, like industry secrets. Like I just told you that format. Again, sure. I can tell the entire world how to do that, what we did there, and they can't repeat it.
Yeah. So obviously, there's all these different kind of stakeholders involved in influencer marketing. The space has changed fundamentally since I even got into it 5 or 6 years ago. What do you think is coming next? What does the future look like for influencer marketing?
So first off, I actually don't agree that influencer marketing fundamentally changed. Actually, I've loved including examples of influencer marketing from predating the internet. And I think they're shining examples of what influencer marketing could be. Like if we go back to the roots of influence and how influencer marketing works, it's like partly content marketing, partly content, partly experiential marketing. If we go back to pre-internet, I think we have a really good roadmap to what influencer marketing could be.
Yeah. Do you have any good examples?
Oh my God. My favorite. So there's two great stories that predate the internet. One is, you don't smoke.
No.
But you remember Camel cigarettes.
Sure.
So Camel cigarettes was trying to get this audience that, like a cigarette brand knows their audience. It's like something like, I don't know, 30 to 45 years old. The guy who was in charge of their marketing and wanted to do like a new campaign was in New York City. And he saw that like every bartender in New York City had a pack of cigarettes that they gave for free to their customers. So what he did for the marketing campaign was he just got Camel cigarettes and bought packs of cigarettes for bartenders in New York City. Just gave them for free to these bartenders. And so suddenly, like overnight, every New York drinker who's in a bar is smoking a Camel cigarette. And Camel cigarettes like went on and did great business. Like it worked phenomenally. Like it suddenly was in the ethos of the world. Like people wanted Camel cigarettes.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a great influencer campaign. Like
sure.
Identifying exactly where does your patron experience your product, put it into their hands, give it to someone who's going to put it into their hands, without social media, without this idea of impressions. Like how do you measure how many impressions? It's like, no, you can measure how many cigarettes people smoke.
That's right. Yeah.
And then the other example is from Madam C.J. Walker, who was America's first female Black millionaire. I think there's a show or documentary about her, but the simple story is she owned and made this hair care product. This was like in the 1920s. And in order to get her hair product used in salons, like people go to a salon to get their hair done, the consumer doesn't know what product they're using.
Sure.
So who does is the salon owner or the person who's making the hair, doing the styling the hair. So what she did is she created a school and taught like 20,000 women how to do hair. And it was like a certified course to become a hairstylist. And so you could own your own shop and do your own hairstyling, but using this product. And now this person who learned how to style hair from day zero used this product.
Built a habit. Familiarity.
Yeah.
Products. Yeah.
But it's also like you're using the product for the customer, and the customer's like, oh, I've never had my hair done this well. What's that product?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, this is the product I use. I only use this product. And that's how she became a millionaire. Was like
yes.
she empowered people to use the product, showed them how to use it. 2, she created businesses for other people, empowered other businesses. So now there's like 20,000 hair salons around the country that are businesses in themselves, creating a livelihood for people. And like, that's influencer marketing. That's brand advocacy. That's brand ambassadorship. Like, we see that all the time. I don't know if you have like, you see that in like Google certificates and like HubSpot certification. Like, you see that now digitally a lot.
Yeah. The internet hasn't changed it necessarily. It's just, given rise to new ways to reach audience and give these potential influencers a platform. That's cool.
Yeah. And influencer marketing and I think my biggest thesis I found from these examples is that like influencer marketing is very different than influencers. Those are 2 very separate things.
And what do you mean by that? Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Influencers are people who have some type of audience, some specific audience online. Influencer marketing is the actual campaign and creative, not justification, but creative work that goes into figuring out what and who influences your customer. Which it doesn't have to be an online creator with a social media following in order to, that might not be an influencer for your marketing campaign.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's a good distinction. So what's coming next? If you had to make 3 predictions for the future of the influencer space or media and entertainment more broadly, what do you foresee?
What do I foresee happening, or what do I wish is happening, are 2 separate things, I guess.
Sure.
A year ago, pre-COVID, I thought that there would be an incredibly large amount of new agencies doing incredibly diverse work. Like, you would get, I forgot the term, but not niche down, but like get really specific verticals of influencer marketing, like influencer marketing for travel, there's like Black Girl Digital. It's like, I know what they do. Like, it's not a weird name, a conglomerate that we do everything. We handle all influencer marketing. It's like, no. Here's influencer marketing for gay travel. Here's influencer marketing for sports, for athletes, for this. And I saw that happening over the last year. But unfortunately, earlier this year, just a lot of those smaller companies just don't exist anymore.
And do you think that's a result of COVID and the broader macroeconomic climate being more difficult for small businesses to operate? Or do you think it was just a problem with the business model, that being too specialized didn't allow you to serve a broad enough base of customers? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it was because of COVID that just, if you have only 3 clients and all 3 of them don't have any budget to spend, you don't have a business, you don't have a job. Whereas the same thing happened at multinational corporations where like, 33% of our clients have now gone to nothing. They don't exist anymore. And so, 33% of our staff have to be laid off. I think that's exactly the same situation as a small company who's like a freelancer, who's like, I have no overhead, I have no office, so I just make 100% of my income from these 3 clients. Oh, 100% of my income is gone. Or get laid off from a company because you were in the, experimental part of their labor force. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough.
But maybe this is just me thinking like a wishful thinking, but I also think that, and COVID, without COVID or with COVID, whatever, looking back at recession times, a normal human being just has to survive through a recession and then will come up. I think influencer marketing is poised at this very existential point right now, where we could actually see in the next 5 to 10 years that influencer marketing doesn't exist anymore. But that's a good thing. And that's a good thing, because influencer marketing is a really excellent multiplier of every single part of the marketing funnel. And in fact, if you include also the marketing hourglass and you say, okay, there's brand awareness, there's purchase intent, and then there's sales, which is the marketing funnel.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go, okay, there's also loyalty programs, brand ambassadorship, brand advocacy. There's a lot of marketing done
beneath the surface after the transaction has occurred. Yeah.
And influencer marketing actually is a really amazing tactic that amplifies every single part of that entire hourglass, which begs the question, or precipitates the next idea of, well, then it's not actually a marketing strategy. It's a tactic that you can apply to any other strategy and amplify it. Like we've done campaigns where we only did a social halo, and that was quote unquote influencer marketing. It was like, oh yeah, there's this piece of content that's created that the company has their owned, and they have an earned, they have a owned and paid component, and the earned is the influencer marketing, but they're paying for that. So is that earned or owned or paid? Like they own this, like a trailer release. That's what we did. We did a trailer release. So that's an owned piece of content. They're paying for the influencers who are essentially saying, I like this film because I'm connected to it thematically. Okay, that sounds like earned. That sounds like PR. It's everything. So a CMO has a really tough time determining what is and what isn't influencer marketing, which is really good for influencer marketing if it amplifies every single thing. Like you should do that more and more. You should be applying more and more of your budget to it if it works.
Yeah. And you shouldn't think of it as just a silo, right? Where it's like, okay, here's our digital spend, print spend out of home, right? Influencers over here, or maybe it's a subsection of, you have digital, and then underneath that you have social, and underneath that you have influencer. Mm-hmm. Influencer permeates. It's a strategic approach, not one tactic to employ budget against. It should be applied throughout the whole consumer journey, as you're explaining, and it should be a part of everything else that you're doing.
Yeah, and then now suddenly, like suddenly there's no industry that's called influencer marketing, which sounds bad. Like sounds awful. Like we have no industry. No, but you are pervasive across everything.
It's just marketing, period.
Yeah.
So Andrew, one of my favorite questions to ask everyone who comes on the show, and you're going to have such a unique answer to this because you strike me as this just classically entrepreneurial person, where it's like you can't help but start the film festival in college. You can't help but find your way into producing an English talk show in Mongolia. You can't help but create Vine videos for people in LA. Like your brain just constantly thinks about, hey, how can I solve this problem? How can I commercialize this idea, build a business around it? If you were starting something brand new in the digital media space today, what would you do?
That's actually a really tough question, because I could list you 100 things to do.
I'm sure. What's one of those ideas that just keeps nagging at you that you keep beating up and saying, hey, is there something here? What's one of those ideas that just keeps calling to you?
So I mean, the one idea that didn't work for me, but I'm sure could work for someone else, is, well, actually sort of you're doing. A lot of people are trying to do this, is basically analysis on demand. Like what works and what doesn't. I was working as like a growth hacker for like a social media growth hacker for like 5 years, and working with creators and influencers who are like, how do I grow? The question is, how do I grow? Well, 100% of creators have that question, and there's no one answer. So how do you figure out, how do you determine priority? How do you determine what works? If you ask any big creator, content creator right now, ask them a question, how did you grow? Number one answer, and the only answer they'll give, is they made content. I created. Mm-hmm. Creators create. That is it. And that's such a youthful, spry, also calamitous answer, because then you start talking about, well, you just got lucky because you got this viral. Like Kombucha Girl just got lucky that she was a meme. Well,
yeah, or that, or people say, oh, but what you did 5 years ago won't work for me today, because the industry moves so quickly. Yeah.
And so like I had to, like, literally, it was my job for a while to figure out how many levers, what are the levers you can pull for growth? How can you apply? How hard should you pull them? And that abstraction layer, I think, could still be figured out. I think there's a lot of ways people are doing it. The agency model seems to be the only way people start. That's how I did it. And then the moment I got away from the agency model and started doing a web app, it all fell apart, because you need like that. You need that person that you trust to, like, we see this all the time actually in Hollywood, and now in influencer marketing and in online digital video, is with managers, right? Like a manager takes 20%. It sounds awful. They take 20% of everything you make. Well, they also got you like 5x the number of deals. Like your deal flow magically started coming in, but you didn't see that because all you saw was the extra one deal you did. So yeah, like there's an abstraction layer around creators and influencers that I think is still yet to be fully worked out upon. It's like, actually, this is a good example. Kombucha Girl is now repped by someone, but like, should she be? Like, I mean that in a good way. Like, should she have had like some technology that could have helped her figure out if this is what she wanted to do? She fell in, I don't know if you know her story, but she became a meme, and then she was a banker, and it's a great YouTube video actually, I think from BuzzFeed. She was a banker, and essentially her boss was like, are you gonna be this person like that I see in this meme? And she's like, no, I that's not me. Somebody else put that, like, she had to like explain what a meme is to her boss. And then a week later, they're like, you can't work here anymore. And she lost her job.
Wow, geez, that's horrible. And so she was like, I guess I'm just going to lean into it then, huh?
Yeah, and she's like in LA now, like as a manager.
Amazing.
She's like, this is the only thing I can do.
Well, good.
So you ask her.
Yeah.
Well, is that good? Like, she had a banker job. She was like set for leave.
Sure. Well, I'm saying the way that she reacted to, the adversity of losing her job for something that wasn't her fault, out of her control, and she made, lemonade out of lemons. So good for her. But in any event, Andrew, this has been awesome. You have been so generous with your time. Where can people find out more about you, more about Influence Weekly, and all the amazing projects that you're involved with?
Yeah, influenceweekly.co. Find me on Twitter, LinkedIn. I know all of the other people that have my last name, so you won't find another Andrew Kamphey. You can Google me. I Google myself often.
So he's out there. Come find him, track him down. Or if you're in Bali, come pay him a visit, because Bali needs the tourism right now.
Actually, yeah. I mean, this is probably a bad thing to say now. I don't know. Everything changes so often right now. Yeah. But like, Kelly Slater was here.
There you go.
He was surfing. Like, somehow Kelly Slater got to Bali and is surfing.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, Andrew, this was awesome. Like I said, we've known each other for a number of years, but it's always great when I get to sit down with someone and peel back the layers. And your story just gives me wanderlust of wanting to travel to all these incredible places that you've been to, just saying yes and leaning into these awesome experiences and then starting businesses and seeing where they're going to go. I love it. And I love your commitment and passion to the influencer space. For a long time, you've been one of those people who just like surfaces great resources. And I always learn something, every time, I read the newsletter and get a chance to connect with you. So thanks again for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm James Creech, and this has been another edition of All Things Video. If you like what you hear, we hope you'll share and subscribe for new episodes. See you next time.